Hello, everybody. I'm broadcasting from the Great North Woods, from the 45th parallel, halfway to the North Pole, in the middle of one of the coldest winters in a long time. And though I don't want to get into this whole nonsense about global warming, we are experiencing quite the opposite of that, especially if you want to judge every storm and every cold snap or hot spot to global warming. And that's ridiculous, but because the reality of it is you're talking about weather and patterns, and they exist, and you have to take averages, and this takes at least 30 years, but usually you're talking about a 100-year process where you go back and measure global temperature, not local temperature, which is also a mistake. Everyone seems to like to do that. And they like to speak about, they don't remember a winter like X, Y, or Z, and their personal experience and whatever. But since the entire nation is in a cold snap, I thought I'd mention it. Because one thing you can say is the weather's never been like this, where the entire United States is experiencing cold, extreme cold, and breaking records in many ways. I guess therein lies the proof or the truth of the whole thing. There's absolutely no way, even I think probably within a bubble of global warming, and if you want to take small snapshots of time where they just stick to one year or another, how do you explain this extreme cold? And this isn't the first year that we've had cold. It's been going on now at least for a few years, 5 years probably. We haven't had any global warming. Most people are unaware of that for almost 18 years. And when we didn't have any, they changed the terminology of global warming to climate change because they couldn't explain that we were actually going backwards. In fact, what we've experienced the last 20 or so years, including the current weather situation right now in America, which pretty much amazingly, superstorms that are the size of America, which no one's ever heard of anything like that, has probably been manufactured and manipulated. It has nothing to do with our climate, the globe, or God, or nature, because this is unnatural, most of it. But regardless of that, even though we have to go through all of this nonsense, even though we're experiencing it, that doesn't change the last 100 years. It gives you a microcosm look at a few things, and certainly since we've cut back on everything so much. And it wasn't because we're trying to save the planet, it was because of these outrageous laws, cap and trade, everything else that made it almost impossible for the United States to compete in the manufacturing market with all the regulations and everything. And there were, most people think that these regulations are there to save us, or to save the environment, or to cut down on, oh my goodness, carbon emissions or whatever. But the reality of it is this: coal-burning plants, the only thing that they ever really released into the atmosphere was that. It's part of the nonsense of global warming is they had to make an enemy, and that is carbon, or carbon dioxide, which, by the way, is in every beverage you drink that has bubbles in it. So if it was so dangerous, cheers, if it was so dangerous, then why aren't we counting how many sodas you open and drink? And by that, I mean, that's where a lot of your pollution's coming from, isn't it? And now that we all sip our favorite beverages, we exhale, we speak, and God forbid we fart. Some of us are proud of it, some of us aren't. But regardless, that's carbon dioxide, kids, okay? And we have a symbiotic relationship with everything else in nature here, most especially plants, most especially trees. So as we exhale, trees inhale. And the trees inhale carbon dioxide. That's their food. Now, if carbon dioxide is so dangerous, which everybody says it is, and it's the boogeyman, and we all have to cut our carbon emissions and everything else, And we'll get back to the coal thing in a minute, but here's the point. That's the only thing that a clean coal plant was ever producing at all, and very little. In fact, what most of you do not know, because they don't want you to know, is they believe that cows are the biggest culprit right now on the planet Earth of releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Yep. I should say you heard it here first, but it would be untrue. This is just a common sense thing. This is also documented, at least 20 years old, maybe 30-year-old research. I don't necessarily even believe in it. But by their own records, the same people that are pushing this whole IPCC global warming hoax nonsense on us from right out of the United Nations, and it's about a power grab. It's about one world government. It has nothing to do with saving the planet. But the very people who are behind this don't deny that their own studies show that the biggest culprit of CO2 emissions are cows. Now, how, you might ask? Because cows don't drive cars, right? And they don't run factories, and they certainly don't live in houses. It's called flatulence. Cows fart. And according to these geniuses, these brain surgeons, these incredible intellects, they're telling us by their own studies, I think it's like 33% or something crazy like that, that cows are producing the rise in CO2 at least 30 to 33%. The number one culprit. Let that soak in. Now, here's the other thing that's interesting. While we all agree that we're such terrible people because we use fossil fuels to live, whether it be to heat our homes, to drive our cars, for any of the activities that we choose to do, which also includes exhaling, includes breathing, folks. You're being charged to breathe. And I know our grandparents joked about that and said someday they'll figure out a way to tax us for how much we breathe. Well, I hate to break it to you. They have been doing that now since cap and trade went through, and you are being taxed on breathing. You're being taxed on everything, including breathing. But anyways, yes, these geniuses believe that, you know, it's really all about the cows farting. To some 33%. Here's a question that none of you ever asked with this whole global warming nonsense, this whole climate change nonsense, this whole we all have to save the planet and go green nonsense. None of you ever asked it. If we do, what's our benefit? In fact, forget about if we do, what's our benefit. Let's just go to what percentage do human beings contribute, and what can we hope for if we comply with all these crazy cockamamie taxes? Which, by the way, don't solve anything. The money that you pay into those taxes doesn't go to improving the climate, doesn't go into improving the biosphere, the atmosphere, the weather, and nothing. You're just paying sin tax. You've sinned, so you have to pay for your discretion, for your sin, what you've done wrong. And this is supposed to socially engineer you and discourage you from doing more of that, which means that either one of two things are going to happen. You're going to run out of money, so you can't continue to live, or you're going to cut back on how much of these things you do, whether that be how much air conditioning you use, how much heat you use, how far you drive. And by the way, most of you are unaware, but this is what they're doing. Because in addition to the fact that they want to charge you by the mile how far you drive to discourage you from damaging the planet, social engineering. Of course, they don't necessarily say that out loud until questions are asked in town meeting, but then they do admit that. Because that's what this is about. This is about teaching you a lesson. You're paying representatives an ungodly amount of money, first of all, in their own salaries, and then an ungodly amount of money in their taxes, to tell you that you're destroying the planet and that you need to ride a bike a little bit longer and drive your car a little bit less. You're paying for that. Well, anyways, I digress. Let's go back to what I originally said here. What could we hope to benefit? If we went by every one of their rules, we met every one of their terms, we get to the end of the day and we've done exactly what they demand we do. Well, by their own numbers and everything else, they literally do admit that we will have less. Best case scenario is less than 0.3%. We won't even have a percent. We're not going to make a difference, kids. Because the reality of it is, although we are self-centered and we think the world revolves around us, and of course the universe revolves around that, we're insignificant. That's even with all the crazy pollution and everything we do. By the way, CO2 is not pollution. It's a natural process of life, and it's required because without us producing a whole lot of CO2, or the world producing a lot of CO2, and that's many, many processes, volcanic and others. But if the world doesn't produce CO2, then the plants don't produce oxygen. What do we need to survive? We need oxygen. So we have a symbiotic relationship with trees. Now, if a very high percentage of every dollar you paid into a tax, cap and trade, or any of these green taxes, if a high percentage of that went into planting a tree every time they spent that dollar, it would at least make a little bit of sense. But they don't do that. No. Your money goes into bank accounts for rich cats that don't care and drive around limousines, have several mansions, have private jets, have yachts, have basically their carbon footprint is 10 times what your town carbon footprint is. And yet they want your town to go green, and they want you to tighten your belt and use a little less AC and a little less heat, insulate a little bit. Hey, put light bulbs in your house. The type of light bulbs that if you drop one, you have to call a hazmat team, and you're going to die if you inhale the mercury that gets released from it. But don't worry about that, because mercury is perfectly safe when you inject it into yourself. And a vaccine. Folks, you've really been dumbed down here, and it's sad, but someone needs to tell you. You need to wake up. You need to realize what's going on. You need to, question everything I've told you. Call me a liar. Prove me wrong. I'm begging you. I'm begging you to do a little bit of real research. Don't tune into whatever your favorite news channel is. I'm begging you to take anything I've said and prove it wrong. We have ice cores, folks, and we know why the climate is the way it is. It's been this way, and we're actually in a warming cycle right now, believe it or not. It's a big, big, big cycle. It's very normal. It's very gradual. It's very gentle. And the reality of it is, it's about a degree or so that we rise every 100 years. And we have been doing this since we came out of the Little Ice Age. Interestingly enough, they didn't use the Little Ice Age in their equations to sell you global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it. You know what else they didn't include in that study? Or that theory, where it's no longer a theory because the science is settled, and 97% of scientists agree. That's what they tell you. The science is settled. Well, first of all, science by its very nature can never be settled. Let that soak in. Think about that for one moment. Because these are just catchphrases. These are just nonsensical slogans. Like a political slogan, a guy's running for office, yes we can, or whatever crap you want to fucking insert there. It's ridiculous. But let's get real. Let's get real about our climate, folks. Let's get real about what they've done to us and what they're using. 97%, they say. 97% of scientists agree. Well, that's not true. That's just patently a lie put out by the United Nations with the IPCC paper that they sent out. And I think it was like in the 90s, and might have been at Rio 97 or 93, whatever the heck it was. You can find out if you research it. It's kind of old now to people like me who absolutely know what's going on. It's very old. It won't be hard for you to find it where the original IPCC was. But I think it was the Rio Agreement. It was 97, 93, something like that. It was in the 90s. It was a long time ago. It was 20 years ago, at least. There was no 97% agreement on anything. And again, like I said, it can't be in science because science is always challenged. Science is skepticism. Because if we didn't have skepticism in science, we wouldn't have all the things that we have today. We never would have made it to the moon. And apparently the moon would have been made of cheese. And you can just go on and on and on. The world's flat and all this other nonsense. But you can go on and on and on with all this stuff because the science is settled. Science has never been settled. And we don't have all the answers, and we maybe never, ever will. And the reason, and that's perfectly fine, because we're not God. We didn't create this place. We can work at this all day long, and we can get a better understanding of it, but we're not going to know everything. We're not going to know how everything works, and that's good. We're not supposed to. We're part of it. We're not the controllers of it. So yes, this 97%, ridiculous, manufactured, nonsense. Most of the people, and this has all been revealed, it's all been admitted, I'm not just giving you hearsay. There were several people, and I think it was only a couple thousand scientists. And by the way, if you're unaware, there are a whole lot of scientists in the world. Not 2,000. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of scientists with all kinds of specialties and leanings to whatever science that they study, you know, whatever they are. But here's the point. This 97% was a couple thousand people, several of which, even hundreds of which, weren't scientists at all. In fact, many more of them didn't even have their PhDs. They were students. And these questionnaires that they sent out to get this incredible agreement on scientific terms was flawed to begin with. If you read the questions they asked, all they wanted to know was, do you agree that, you know, it seems like this and it seems like that? It's not even science. And it's certainly not an agreement. But what they've done since with these scientists is they've made sure, if in fact you want your grant, if you want a job, you're going to go along with this global warming nonsense. And if not, you're not going to get your money. If you don't get your money, guess what? Your career's over. You have no career. You need that money. So you're going to write a favorable paper that supports the global warming hoax. And if you don't, there's no Christmas for your children, let alone you're not buying another car. But you kiss their ass just enough, you really kiss it good. Well, you might put a Mercedes in your driveway. In addition to the fact you've just funded yourself for the next 10 years to research something that you don't have to believe in. You just have to research it and tell them what they want to hear so that they get what they want and you get what you want. It's called corruption. It's called greed. They've bastardized the scientific, the whole scientific basis. I mean, what science is built on, they have destroyed. There's no morality left in it, and there's hardly any science left in it. There are a few that will stand up and that have been fighting for a very long time to try to share the truth. Very, very learned scientists, top guys. Guys that specialize in geology and other facets of science that specifically talk to global change, climate, weather, etc. They're speaking out. They are. And they're real. They're for real. But they've all taken hits. Most of them have been fired from the universities. And, you know, mainstream media is not going to give them too much time. But this is reality. You can find all of this if you just took 5 seconds out of your busy day and you researched it. It's very simple. So what else did they hold out? What else did they lie to you about? Well, you know, their model is built around a model, that's a computer model, by the way, that they manipulate the numbers. They take out whole hundreds and not thousands of years of global climate to make their model work. But there's also a very glaring, pun intended, very bright, pun intended, thing that they take out of their equation to make it work. It's called the sun. It's that big yellow ball that rises every morning. And that's not included in global warming or climate change. It's just not considered, folks. Now, if you're that stupid, then you're dumber than a 4-year-old who knows that when the sun comes out in the morning, it gets warmer. When it goes down at night, or you're sitting under an apple tree or whatever shades you, it's cooler. Let that soak in. Think about it for one moment. Their entire model, the one that says that global warming is real, anthropomorphic global warming, man-made global warming, doesn't include the sun. They omit the sun and solar radiation. Let that soak in. So if you can't explain temperature rise based on natural occurrences on Earth, except for the fact that man is here, of course it's all our fault. But even then, by their own numbers, it's less than 1%. Now, they claim if we didn't exist on this planet, if we all just died, we all left, it'd be less than a 3% change in the climate. That still doesn't change anything. Think about it. If we just didn't, we're not here anymore. It'd be less than a 3% change in the climate. I'm sorry? What? If you look at their predictions, if you look at their projections, of course they're trying to scare you with a water rise, which is nonsense anyways. It's not going to happen in a day. What do? You move a little bit further back. The people who are fortunate enough to live a few blocks away from the water get to cash in now because they live on oceanfront property, and now their properties are worth significant amounts more money than they were before. But how's that horrible to anybody? We just back off a little bit. No big deal. And in addition to the fact that we just back off a little bit, we just move to, take a few steps back. We can do this over years because it isn't like we only have 5 seconds to do it. They're talking about a rise in temperature that could be as much as 3 degrees. I know when you sit there and you theoretically think about all the horrible stuff that's going to happen then, how bad that might be. Are you kidding? We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of years for these things to happen. And if it was 3 degrees warmer, are you going to bust into flames in the street? I know whole lots of people. I don't know anybody as crazy as me that moves to the 45th parallel. Moves up to the snow. Everyone goes the other way. They all want to go for a climate where it's 10 to 15 to 20 degrees warmer all the time. You guys are worried about 3 degrees? You're kidding me, right? Have you listened to yourself? How stupid that sounds? You're worried about 3 degrees. The climate changed 3 degrees. It wouldn't even change the tropics. Oh my God, it's 103 instead of 100 today. Are you kidding? It's ridiculous. The only way that makes a difference is instead of being 50, it's 53. It feels a little bit better. Or 48 and 51, yeah, it feels a little bit better. But where's the difference here? How's that going to affect your life? How's it going to change your life? It isn't. So if you want to throw millions of dollars at something that you're not going to fix anyways, that you don't have any real control over anyways, then you're just shining yourself on. And you're enslaving yourself and your children for your do-good, feel-good nonsense, which basically is nothing more than communism. And you'll end up there. Because it'll be full control of absolutely everything. Your water, your food, how you live your life, your lifestyle, your government. Because you're arrogant and stupid enough to think that you or the universe revolves around you and that you can make a big impact. Because you can't. And you're not killing this planet. Even with all the pollution, everything we do, if we were polluting every single day, all day long, what do you think you're going to do? If you think you're going to hurt it, you are more arrogant than I thought you were in the first place. The world's been here for billions of years. It will shake us off like a flea, like a tick. It'll be fine. The only issue that we face on this planet is us. Wake up.